Alright guys, so finally we get to the easy part. Now that we're done typing all the hard code, the background functionality to pretty much make our app work with the SQL database, what we can do is just say, okay, this is the button to add a product, this is the button to delete a product. We essentially just need to hook up our interface with the code, simple enough, and we do that through main activity. So all of my imports that we're going to need are right there. So you can just copy all of those. Now let's just go ahead and get a reference to everything on our interface, all of those widgets. So edit, text, we call that Bucky's input. Text view, we call that Bucky's text. That's where we're going to be printing everything out. And remember, my DB handler, we'll just call this DB handler. Alright, so now let's go ahead and on create and do the housekeeping stuff. So Bucky's input, set this equal to edit text, find view by ID r.id dot Bucky's input, and the same thing with Bucky's text equals text view, find view by ID r.id dot Bucky's text. Now after this we need to set our DB handler object, and of course that's equal to new, what was that, my DB handler. Now remember, whenever we create a new database handler, it takes, where's a constructor, 4 parameters. The context, which is just going to be the keyword this from the other class, and we can just use null for the name of the database because we already set it equal to the constant right here. We can pass null in for factory, and it'll do all of that behind the scenes. And for the last one, we need to pass an int, so we can just pass in 1, but it'll actually get the value from right here. So again, that's this for the context, null, null, 1. Essentially, we're just letting this class take care of all the hard stuff, and we already talked about that before. Now, we're going to have 3 methods in here. One method is going to be for this add button. Remember, we said on click, call the add button clicked. Another method is going to be for the delete button clicked. And the last method is just going to be for printing this out. It's going to be real simple, like 3 lines of code. So whenever we do that, we'll just call a method called print database. It won't even take any parameters at all. And it's giving us an error because we need to implement that method right there. So this is just going to be public void, and it's not going to take any parameters. The only thing that it's going to do is it's going to set the text of this to whatever we retrieve when we call database to string. Simple enough. So the first thing we need is a string, and we might as well just reference it through db string and set it equal to the database handler dot, and remember that method was called database to string. So this is what we coded in the last tutorial, and we're just taking whatever string we retrieved, which pretty much is the product name of every single row, and we're going to store it in that variable. And now we just take that Bucky's text, which is our text widget, and set the text, not set enabled, set the text equal to db string. And after this, what I want to do is I want to take Bucky's input, and I also want to set the text equal to blank right there. And the reason I want to do this is because, well, I'll explain this in just a second. Essentially, we are going to print the database, whatever is in our file, after we add a new item or after we delete an item. So whenever we type watermelon and add it, then what's going to happen is it's going to print out watermelon down here, but then, just to make it a little bit easier on the user, we automatically are going to erase the text that was in here, so that way they didn't add watermelon and the word watermelon still chilling up there. So this just makes it a little bit easier on the user if you refresh their input for them, so they don't have to delete it manually. So now, to the database. Alright, so now we have to implement that add button clicked. So public void add button clicked. And that's also why we didn't need a reference to those buttons up here, because whenever we add the onClick method, it pretty much takes care of all the hard work for us, which is really awesome. Alright, so product. And set this equal to new products. Bucky's input dot get text dot to string. And let me type all this and then I'll explain what's going on. So DB handler, add product, and print the database. Alright, so whenever they click the add button, what we want to do is we want to say, okay, they're going to have type something in here, like, I don't know, what's something that you can have in your store? Tennis shoes. So we're going to take tennis shoes, add it to the database, so we're going to save it to a file, and then we're going to display tennis shoes down here. Now if you look in our code, whenever we add a new product to the database, we don't just add the string, we actually create a new product object. And every time we create a product object, it sets the product property to whatever we passed in, like tennis shoes. So remember, this is the database handler, and whenever it adds a product to the database, it only accepts a product object. So if you look, add product, to add a new row to the database, it doesn't accept a string. It only accepts a product object. So whenever we pass in that object, it's going to extract the name, the string value, and then it's going to insert that string into the database. So again, this products is just normal objects, normal Java code. This is making everything compatible so it can insert it or extract it from the database, and this is just hooking up the interface with all of our code. And of course, we know what this does. It pretty much makes a string appear on the screen. And the only method that we need is that delete method, and that's public void delete button clicked. And alright, and also another thing I always forget to do is make sure you pass in your views as your parameters. If you don't, then it's not going to register that onClick method or whatever you set onClick as. Alright, so to delete an item, pretty simple. We take string, and I'll just name it something like input text, and set this equal to alright, so all we're doing here is we're getting whatever text the user jotted down in that little input, and then whenever we call DB handler, remember we're gonna delete product. Now delete product, this indeed takes a string, so we don't pass the product here, we actually pass the string value. So the input text, we can just pass the string value right there, and then we're going to print out the database on the screen. So again, you can set up your database handler a little bit differently, but this should work. So let me go ahead and start my emulator. Alright, so hopefully whenever we type something like bacon, we can click add and add it to the database, and then we can, let's add a few more tuna, oops, not press enter, and like meatball. And then if you ever want to delete one, you can just type in tuna and it will delete tuna, or whatever word you type in, it will delete it. And again, I know that I can't really demonstrate it, but if this was installed on a phone, or if you're testing this on a device, then what you can do is you can turn off your device and then you can turn it back on, and all of the information in your database is going to be saved. So pretty cool. And that is pretty much the basics of how to work with the SQLite database to save data.